everybody, and welcome back to Serenity Art Space. My name is Lou, and this is our Thursday art class. Now today I chose a couple of projects that I had in Procreate, and I'm going to show you those, and I'm going to explain a little bit of my process on how I put them together and finish them off. And they're a bit different from each other in the sense that one is very muted colors in a sense, and it's a flash sheet. So there are several small designs all on one sheet, and that was for a benefit that we were doing for a recent widow last year. The other project is a cover-up that I did on a gentleman's arm, and it's a big tree, and that one I wanted to have a little more saturated to accomplish the cover-up. And in this video you'll see a video of the Procreate project that I did. It's a little sped up, otherwise you'd be sitting here for hours, but I'll go through all the different steps that I went through, and hopefully that'll help you when you're going to conceptualize and draw something. Maybe there's a few steps here that you can incorporate into your own skills. Alright, so sit back and enjoy. And as always, let me know if you have any questions or comments. Put them down in the comments there. I'll be more than happy to answer those, and either right there in the comments or do a whole separate video just covering your question. Alright, thanks. Okay, so in this project, this was the benefit that we were doing to help a friend of ours who had been recently widowed, and her husband was into a lot of different things, but we had a list of things that reminded people of him. And so our task, there was 3 artists at our shop. Our task was to design some flash sheet, some simple designs that people could get, relatively inexpensive, and we were donating that money to the widow to help her with funeral costs, bills, mortgage, all that stuff. So from the list, I saw Groot on there, and I snagged that up. I said, I love him so much, I want to draw him. And I love cartooning, so I thought it would be a good fit for me. Now, her husband was a painter, but not an art painter. He painted houses. That was his main profession. His name was Jay, so Blue Jays were a big thing that was associated with him. A bunch of other stuff. So I had a few ideas on what I wanted to sketch up, and so when I start this project, I'm going to start with a few of my ideas, and you'll see as I flesh those out a little bit. Alright, so in the beginning, I start with my light blue pencil, and I just start kind of creating my poses a little bit, figuring out my angles, my basic shapes. Once I get that pretty close, with the iPad it's great because I can just take that sketch, move it off to the side, start another one. You can hide entire layers, bring them back, and manipulate things around really great. So for creating a flash sheet like this, I really love this program because it's so easy to move stuff around. So I get a few of my basic sketches, and I don't want to load this page with 15 or 20 drawings. Things get too small and lost in there, so I figured 3 main ones, and you'll see later on as I add a couple other ones just to fill some space. So I start with that light blue pencil. I get all my basic shapes and poses going on, and from there I take a sepia colored pencil and I start drawing over that, and this is where I begin to refine my characters a bit. Start creating some of the actual edges and the fingers and all the different little bits and pieces. And I use that sepia over the blue because it contrasts, so I can see it a lot better. If I did just a light blue sketch and then started drawing darker blue over it, it's muddy. You can't really tell what's new and what's not. So I'll use a contrasting color, and it works in either direction. Once I get that stuff tightened up a bit, I create a new layer, and then I go in with my black pencil, and this is like a graphite type pencil. So whether if you're doing this on paper, a number 2 pencil or a lead holder or a mechanical pencil, and this is where you get your final design going. Sometimes I will skip this step. Sometimes my sepia drawing is really tight, and from there I'll just go directly to inking. But with this one, I wanted to kind of figure out some of my shading and stuff before I did my final ink. Sometimes if there's a really black shadow or something like that, or a really highlighted area that doesn't want a line, I can figure that out in my shading, and then when I ink it, I don't have to worry about creating a line there when there shouldn't be one, or doing a thicker line with some heavier weight that doesn't need to be there because that whole area is in dark shadow. So from here, I take that pencil, I go through, figure out all my details, and the great thing with using a program like Procreate is I do all these on separate layers. So when I'm done, let's say, I do my blue, I get my sepia over that, and I don't need the blue anymore, I could just shut that layer off or delete it completely. And then same with my black layer, I can do that, get rid of my initial construction layers, and just have the black pencil there. And so here you see that I'm starting to put in some of the other couple of little designs just to fill some space. And I use the same process. I start with that light blue, go into the sepia. Once I'm happy with what I've got going on there, then I can take my mechanical pencil and refine everything, add in like wood grain, since he's made of wood, any kind of texture and things like that. With the little blue jay on his head, I wanted to figure out, before I inked anything, I wanted to figure out where all the black markings are going to be on him, things like that. So once I got everything on there, I dim, or I change the opacity of my pencil layer so I can see my ink a little bit better. And I get out my my ink pen, and I'll go through and ink everything. At this point, I'm doing just a single weight ink line on that. Once that's on there, then I'll know a little bit better. I can look at it and see where it needs a little more dimension before I do any shading, and I will add some weight to some of those lines. I think I've talked about this in another video, but you'll hear me mention it more and more in these videos. Line weight is a technique of taking your lines from a thin line to a thicker line, back to a thin line, in varying ways to create dimension without actually using any shadows. You see this a lot in comics and in cartooning at different levels. You see it in fine art as well. It's just not quite as obvious as it would be in a cartoon or a comic strip. So I get all my power lines on there, and I know I want to keep, the next stage is going to be color and shading. There's going to be a little cut in this video where there was a section where I was just dropping in fill colors just to see what colors I wanted to use. Once I had that figured out, I move on to some shading to create some of the depth to the characters. And that was really the main part of all the shading in this. The color's really so minimal other than the background that that was the part that really needed to get worked out. So I get all my shading in there. Once that's there, I can take a little bit of green, add that kind of mossy color to him, some like a reddish brown in the pot, a red in the button and the heart, things like that. But still keeping it simple, because I knew that these were we wanted these to be quick tattoos, something that someone could come in and get that's not going to take more than 20 or 30 minutes to do and get the next person in. And it worked out great because a lot of people came in, got these tattoos, we raised a ton of money for her, and it was a lot of fun. So you can see in that process, some people will spend a whole lot of time just on one thing, but you can work on multiple things all at once. And this is why I really stress getting used to sketching, getting ideas down in shorthand form so that you can take those and build them up together, or take an individual one and make a whole separate finished art piece out of that. Alright, so this next project is that cover up with using a tree to cover up an existing tattoo on this gentleman's arm. The tree was his idea, and it's a great idea. I love doing cover-ups, and one of the things that I look for in a cover-up, or things that I'll suggest, is anything that I can literally point away from the old tattoo with. And with the tree, you've got these branches, and they're going off in different directions, so you are literally pointing the viewer's eye somewhere else. And I took great advantage of that in this tattoo. It wasn't a very difficult cover-up. The tattoo we were covering is small. The guy did want to go big with his cover-up, which was fantastic. That's one of the things I ask for with my clients when doing a cover-up, is giving me some room to work with. Trying to cover something old with something that's just a little bit bigger than the old tattoo is not a good way to go, because you're not taking the viewer's eye somewhere else. No cover-up is 100% perfect unless you're using a solid black. Even then, usually you can tell from the texture of the skin that there was something else there. So I like to use a lot of bright colors in cover-up tattoos to give the viewer something else to look at, something that's going to grab their attention. It seems that most of the time when doing a cover-up, the tattoo we're covering is old and dark. It's usually black, so using bright colors definitely is going to draw people's eyes somewhere else. So with this one, with every cover-up, I take a photograph of the old tattoo and the space that I have to work with. That way I have my complete canvas, and usually I try to forget that it's a cover-up. I try to just create something that, if there was nothing there, would make a great tattoo. And then I start there, and as I go into my drawing, I find ways to cover it up, either with in this case, I put it in the leaves of the tree where it's very busy. There's a lot of shadows because the tree's got different, parts of those leaves are closer and further away from us. Another thing that I did was where I put my light source, which is the sun, put it directly behind the tree to create kind of a silhouette or a backlit type design, and that gives me a reason to have those shadows there. One of the things that, I critique my own work, and we all do this when we look at others' tattoos. We also critique them, no matter who they are, and it's not coming from a negative place. It's coming from looking for things that you can avoid in your own work, and things to keep in mind. And one of the things I will see is there's no obvious light source, and where the cover-up is, there's usually the heaviest amount of shadowing. And then, let's say there's a group of 3 roses covering something. The one that's covering is very heavily shaded. The other 2 are less shaded. And that dark area just draws people in because it's different. And if you looked at, in one of my videos, I mentioned a book called Drawing Scenery and Seascapes from Jack Ham. Early in that book, he goes over where to put things on your canvas and why. And his example was a blank canvas, and then he puts just 1 dot on it. And if you're not looking, and then you look at that canvas, your eye is immediately going to be drawn to that dot first. Now, if those dots are different sizes, it's a 50-50 chance. You're either going to start at the small one, work your way to the dark, but more than likely you're going to start at the bigger one, and then your eye is going to travel in order of size to the smaller one. These are things I think about when I do a cover-up. So if there's going to be dark shading used in the cover-up, I want to make sure that dark shading is used elsewhere throughout the design. That way it's not an obvious dark spot that's going to draw people's eye to it. I want their eyes to go. As always, I start with my light blue sketch, and very loose. I really just want to create motion. I want to know where my big basic shapes are. Any specific elements. With this one, he wanted he and his wife's name carved into the tree, and then he also wanted the names of their 2 children somewhere in the tree. I don't like hiding things. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of putting lettering into a tattoo, but I do my best to meet my client's needs. So I put the kids' names up in the tree. From that light blue sketch, I get out my sepia pencil and I start really figuring out more refined edges to my tree. I want to get my leaf groupings figured out and my branches. And also in another video I mentioned drawing through, and you'll notice in this tree there's branches coming off the back of the tree, not just the sides. branches coming from the front, the back, all around. So keep that in mind when you're drawing trees. Branches grow from the edge of the tree all the way around in 360 degrees. So I get through my sepia sketch pretty quickly. One of the things that he wanted was, or said, like, he wanted the roots to be really kind of strong and gnarly, really rooted to the earth. So I drew in some good strong roots in there, a little bit of grass for some interest. And again, these are things that are going to catch people's attention. And that grass and those roots are as far away from that cover-up as they could possibly be. So that's something down low for them to look at. Also, the names carved in the tree are down there. That's another point of interest. And then later on in the project video, you'll see when I put in the sun and the color, that's another point of interest that's behind the whole thing. It's all the way in the background. And that's something that people can focus. People love sunsets and sunrises. Now, I could have put that sun down low on the horizon. There's a couple of reasons I didn't do that. One I already mentioned, I wanted my light source directly behind the tree to create that backlighting effect. Also, philosophically, sunset oftentimes refers to the end of something, and I didn't want this to be a sunset on their family. I wanted the sun to be up there and full and strong. So that's why I placed the sun where it is. These are all things that I think about when I design something. I think visually and I think philosophically. What are these things? What could they mean? And I try to avoid anything that might be a little negative. And so now you see some color going in, and I start with a really bright, vibrant emerald grass green. I will usually fill in an area. You know, when I create my outlines with my my ink pen, do that on a separate layer, and then I make that my reference layer, and I close off my lines so that I can select inside of those lines and just fill with my local color, and then I can make that layer or those bits, I can alpha lock them, which means when I go to paint, painting, it's only going to paint on what's on that layer. So I put in my local green, alpha locked it, and then took a darker shadow and started to create those shapes. And once I go through that, get those in there, I get a lighter color, and I start creating some highlights here and there. Again, creating interest in shape. Already, you can you really can't see the old tattoo. Granted, this is very opaque digital over a kind of a faded out photo. I lowered the opacity on the photo of the client just so I could see my drawing better. Towards the end, I'll boost that opacity back to get that old tattoo back to its original darkness and make sure that my design is going to cover that. So I go through all that. I fill the tree in with a local kind of a yellow ochre caramel color, and then I create all my shadows on that. And once the tree is kind of dialed in, I'll drop in my background, and you'll notice I take my outline layer away, and the reason I do that is I want to make sure that my color and shading alone would create enough contrast to be able to recognize, to make it a good piece even without the outline. I don't like relying on an outline to make my piece stand out, because when you're viewing a tattoo from a bit of a distance, you know, that outline doesn't really get seen as much as the color and shading does. So if your tattoo can be, you know, appreciated from a distance, that's why I take those lines away. So I do that. Another thing that I had noticed was the green was a little too vibrant for me, so I knocked that down a little bit, and this is why I do things on separate layers, so I can, once I'm done, that green looked a little too cartoony for me. I wanted to give it more of a natural color, so I'm able to select that layer, mess with the saturation, the color, chroma, and lightness and darkness, so I can go through my whole design, adjust those things until I'm happy with it, and then I ended up with a good finished product that my client loved. We did the tattoo. He was thrilled with it, and actually just this week he emailed me about getting started on his other arm. So anyway, that was my process on the tree. So I hope you enjoyed checking out those projects. You'll probably see a lot more things like that because I do the majority of my artwork on my iPad using Procreate. And every time I do, it records the whole process. And so I've got, actually, I just realized this week that I have a pretty good library of videos like this that I can put up here and discuss with you guys and kind of go over some of my process. In many of them, I'll use reference pictures. I'll put some of those up there and explain how I use reference, when I use it, and things I avoid when using references. So anyway, that's my process, and I hope you were able to get something from that, and even if it's just a little inspiration, but maybe you learned a few tricks if you're a tattooer and interested in doing cover-ups. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I've got a really high success rate with it. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just going by what my clients have told me. So I've got a lot of theories and philosophies when it comes to cover-ups. And some artists that I've worked with have asked, for a little bit of, hints and tips on that, and it's changed their game with cover-ups. They're doing a lot more creative and colorful stuff with the cover-up rather than just blasting over it with black. And so, any questions you have on digital art, I will do a separate video just going over some of the tools and processes that I go through. It's difficult for me right now because I record all these videos with my iPad. And my phone doesn't have really enough memory for really long videos. I got to just work out the logistics of it so that you can see my hand actually selecting tools and showing you the layers and everything. So I'll do one of those here relatively within the next month. You should see one because it's something that I am pretty knowledgeable about, and my coworkers a lot of times will ask me on different tips on how to use Procreate, so I should definitely do one of those. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell, because that'll let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job, and it'll recommend my videos to other people as well. So hopefully you guys are making lots of art and having fun at it. So make a mess, have fun, make crazy art, and I will see you on the next video. Later.